First of all, you want to be doing more than one Instagram post for the brand. And so the goal is to, couple together that Instagram post plus 3 recipes and food photography and nutritional analysis for those recipes and a 10-page healthcare practitioner guide that's going to go in the resources part of the brand's website. Hello, and welcome to episode 8 of the Master the Media podcast. I'm your host, Amy Gorin, and I'm so excited to be here with you today. We are going to be talking about how to land those brand partnerships, especially for brands who say they don't have a budget. Before we dive in, I want to share with you, we are going to be talking a lot about brand partnerships and making money with that. So if you want to see what's possible, we have a freebie for you. It's a free pricing guide on what you can charge to work with brands. So go to masterthemedia.co/pricing-guide to grab that. And your mind might be a little bit blown by how large the amounts of money are. That link is also in our show notes. So the other night we were running a live Q&A for people who had brand partnership questions. And one of the questions I got is one that comes up pretty often, which is what about all those brands who you reach out to and they say we don't have budget, or we want to give you this $20 product in exchange for an Instagram post. Does that mean you can never work with those brands? And the answer is sometimes yes, and sometimes no. So I want to talk through what this means. First of all, we talk a lot in Master the Media about landing partnerships. I do want you to know you are not, even me, I might pitch, let's just say 20 brands. It's not like every single one of those brands comes back and says, yes, Amy, I want to work with you. I want to pay you. A percentage of those brands say that, and the ratio of those brands gets higher, the more you know kind of what to pitch, what to say, what strategies to take. But we actually don't want every single one of those brands to say yes, because that would be overwhelming. And you wouldn't be able to work with, say, 5 different plant-based burger companies because they're in the same category and they overlap, and those brands wouldn't be happy about that. So the reality is, it's just like pitching anything else. If you were pitching yourself to freelance write an article for HuffPost, you're not going to get a yes to every idea that you send. And that's actually, again, I want to emphasize that it is a good thing, because you're going to get feedback on maybe why an idea didn't resonate, or maybe you should circle back at a different time of year. And that's going to help you get better at pitching. So let's talk a little bit more in depth about this. So I'm going to use, again, the example of a brand saying no to you when you pitch them an idea. And there's really 2 main reasons this can happen. One is the brand truly doesn't have budget to pay you. And sometimes what happens is, say you reach out to a brand, you DM them on social media. The brand, they might very well employ a PR firm, so a public relations agency, who is responsible for hiring micro-influencers and whatnot, and healthcare professionals. They might have a separate agency that they use just for social media. And it's very likely that they don't have a budget to hire anyone who is not a true influencer to create content for them. So that's why, I get dozens of emails a week that say like, hey, can we give you free product samples in exchange for some social media content? Or can we feature your testimonial on our website in exchange for, a $20 free product coupon? And those are the opportunities that they're not going to really turn into something much bigger. However, it's very, very possible that the same brand also hires out an agency, and it could be a totally different agency, who is responsible for hiring different types of hiring experts to create different types of content. So what I mean by that is, say there's a whole separate agency and they hire dietitians who work in the media to do media interviews and TV segments on their behalf. They might have that agency might have one arm for healthcare professionals and micro-influencers, and another arm for, actual influencers who have millions of followers. And those are 2 separate categories. And so what this means is a lot of time, you know, is your pitch getting into the right hands? A lot of times if you are actively, like if a brand reaches out to you on social media, that's oftentimes the arm of the brand who doesn't have that budget to pay. Sometimes it might be the arm that does have budget to pay. But anyway, I just wanted to paint that picture. That's a very common reason why you're not getting a yes. And this is also a huge reason why in Master the Media, I teach my students a strategy that does not involve relying on DMs on social media. In fact, that's my least favorite strategy. It's kind of like the last resort. Um, you know, when you pitch a brand, you want to do the digging to find a contact email for them and an actual name and reach out to them and put some thought into the pitch. And that's why in Master the Media right now, we have something called Brand Partnership School. And we're actually literally giving a list of, right now it's 2,500 brands and their contact information so that you can easily pitch those brands instead of DMing them on social media, because your message might not get read on social media. It might not get into the right hands. And, especially, Instagram's one thing, but like LinkedIn, a lot of professionals on there have, they don't want to be DM'd because that's their personal time. And so, anyway, the thing that I want to talk about in more detail is how to actually, send a pitch to a brand and have the brand to be very likely to say yes, and how you're really using different strategies than you are where in the case of just like sending a DM and saying, hey, I love your product, can we work together? Or you're replying to a DM that a brand sends you saying, hey, we love your story, your Instagram reel, can we reshare it on our feed, but we can't pay you. So here's what I mean by all of this. So I think when most of us think about brand partnerships, what comes to mind is usually a social media post, an Instagram reel. That's usually literally what you think of, right? When you're thinking of working with a brand and getting paid by a brand. But the reality is, like, there are hundreds and hundreds of different things that you can do for a brand and get paid for. And most of them do not involve social media. And so that's what I mean by kind of figuring out, what does this brand actually need? And it's really fun. Like when you get into working with brands, like you'll find like you're going to actually be the one who's bringing them ideas and helping them figure out, who are you trying to reach? Are you trying to reach healthcare professionals or consumers? What's your goal? Are you trying to get more products sold? Are you trying to build brand awareness? Are you trying to get more Instagram followers? But when you're trying to figure out what to pitch to a brand, you want to spend at least a few minutes doing some research on what are those brands' pain points. And you, as a healthcare professional, have a unique vantage point where you can flag some of those pain points that the brand honestly might not even know exist. And that's what makes it really likely for the brand to say yes to a really well thought out pitch. So I will give you an example, actually. I was up for this position several years ago, and it was for Panda Express to be their spokesperson. So it was between me and another registered dietitian who had some influence with the media. And I talked with them, gave them my whole spiel of why I thought I'd be a great fit. And I also went into that call thinking, this might be the only time I get to talk to these guys. I'm going to bring them all of my ideas because I have their attention, right? And so I talked them through. I was like, I really think that there's a lot we could do to make your menu items healthier and more attractive to the health conscious consumer. We could think about making some reductions for, reducing added sugar, reducing added sodium, reducing some of the additives and things like that. And that would be a really good thing to implement, not only for the health of Americans, but also to use that as a platform to talk about, the healthier offerings that Panda Express has. And fast forward, I ended up not getting the spokesperson role, which is totally fine. That happens. But what was really cool was because I had shared those ideas with them, they said, We really like your ideas. We want to move forward on implementing them. And we actually will create a budget for you to do this. And so what ended up happening was um, I wrote this, I did all of this research on the restaurants, their core menu items and all the changes we could possibly make, the research behind those changes, implementation strategies. The paper that I put together, it was like 70 something pages of strategy. And so I got paid for that. That was purely behind the scenes consulting, right? That's not something that you necessarily, if you didn't know anything about brand partnerships, you might not necessarily think about. And then what was really ironic was then the next year they hired me as their spokesperson. So the same position I was up for the previous year. And I was their spokesperson to communicate about all of these healthy changes we were making and the timeline of those changes. And so I got paid that year a nice sum to be, featured. My quotes were featured in press releases talking about the healthy changes that we were making. I did social media on my accounts talking about those changes, blog posts. I did media interviews for online media and podcasts, and got the word, helped them get the word out about these changes, these awesome initiative that we were working on. And so my point with this example is that even if a brand, quote unquote, doesn't have budget or they chose somebody else, and by the way, oftentimes brands will work with multiple people at once. It might be they're working with 5 to 10 different healthcare professionals who have, different skill sets to bring to the table. And so what you want to do when you're thinking about like, I really love X brand, let's say it's Impossible Foods, like you really, really love Impossible Foods, you want to work with them. Well, instead of saying something like, or let's give a more kind of generic example, because then I can play with it a little bit more. Let's say you have a peanut butter company that you love and you want to work with them and get paid to work with them. So if you were to reach out to them and say, hey, I'm Amy, I'm a plant-based registered dietitian, I love your products. I think you should hire me to do some social media posts for you. What do you think? You're probably not going to even get a response to that message. If you do, it's going to be a no, because there's nothing in your message there that's compelling. Why you? Why is Amy special? What can you bring to the table? What unique skills? The brand doesn't have any reason to want to pursue this conversation. However, if you were to spend even just a little bit of time doing some research, okay, I love this particular peanut butter. I go to their, I know that I not only snack on it, like I use it to dip banana slices into. I also have this awesome protein ball recipe that I make. And oh, let's not forget about peanut butter smoothies. But when I go to the brand's website, there's literally no recipes on the website. And so there's this whole like category of content and usage that they're missing out on. So if I was to take that pain point, you are an ingredient who does not have any recipes for consumers. And if I were to go to them and say, hi, I'm Amy Gorin. I'm a plant-based dietitian. I've been featured in thousands and thousands of media articles. In fact, my media reach is over 3 billion. I also have a plant-based nutrition blog that gets over 50,000 page views a month. And I love creating recipes. I am a skilled food photographer. I love making the recipes healthy, because I'm a registered dietitian. And I love cooking with your products. And I make these amazing peanut butter balls, this amazing peanut butter smoothie. And, when I was just checking out your website, I didn't see any recipes on your website. And I think this is a huge opportunity to reach consumers and give them healthy recipes to make that are, backed up by a registered dietitian. And is this something that you'd want to talk about? And so you can see how that would resonate just a lot more than a generic pitch. And so what happens next is you might not necessarily have the brand say, yes, we want you to make recipes, Amy. But what's going to happen is they're going to give you the time of day. And so if I say in that query that I send to them, I'd love to talk about this. How about we schedule a quick meeting on Zoom? They're very likely to circle back and say yes. And then what happens next is I get that time, 15, 20 minutes of conversation, and I bring them even more ideas. So maybe the ideas are along the lines of, there's a lot of research about peanut butter, and especially with early introduction of peanut butter to infants, that's obviously a heavily debated topic, but I think you would really benefit from sharing some information about that on your website, in a healthcare practitioner section. So that's something else that I could help you with. And if you bring them ideas that are so valuable, they are likely to say yes to at least one of them. They might say, well, we love the idea of recipes. That's just not something that we want to focus on right now. But we really do agree that we need to put some studies and some research and some resources on our website. So not only would we like you to help us create a guide for that, but we'd also like you to help us communicate the messaging points of why peanut butter is something that the whole family can enjoy, and communicate that in a way that consumers and healthcare professionals would understand. And so what happens after that is, like, you have this whole conversation. The brand is like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad we were put in touch with this amazing registered dietitian, because she's going to help us come up with all of these ideas that, we wouldn't have thought of because we don't have a dietitian on staff. And that's how you get a brand to actually create a budget to work with you. So the goal is, like, not necessarily getting a brand to say, yes, okay, we have a budget of $20,000 a year, and we have to split that up between 5 different people, and we can allocate this much of it to you because we want you to do one Instagram post. First of all, you want to be doing more than one Instagram post for the brand. And so the goal is for instance, to couple together that Instagram post plus 3 recipes and food photography and nutritional analysis for those recipes, and a 10-page healthcare practitioner guide that's going to go in the resources part of the brand's website. And all of a sudden, instead of talking about $2,000 or $3,000 or $4,000 for an Instagram post, which is by no means a small amount of money, but all of a sudden you're talking about $15,000, $20,000 for that whole project scope because you added more deliverables. The brand is getting more of a positive occurrence from working with you. And so what's going to happen is they're going to want to come back to work with you over and over again. And so that's very potentially small-ish amount of money, that's a one-time amount, can potentially turn into a large amount of money that's 5 figures, and that recurs every single year. I have worked with brands for like 6 or 8 years in a row, where every single year, the amount of budget that the brands have changes and the deliverables change, but our work together could be anywhere from $5,000 to $50,000 for a year. And that's literally how you end up working with brands and making well over 6 figures from working with that brand year after year after year. So I'm going to leave you with that. I would encourage you to go and check out a brand that you love and kind of see if you can identify some of their pain points. And then go and download our free pricing guide to see what you could potentially charge for the services that you're offering them. And that will be really exciting. So that pricing guide is at masterthemedia.co/pricing-guide. And let me know what happens. I'd love to hear your success stories.